And we are live. Hello, everyone. My name is Alex Chaffron. I'm a Stuyvesant PA president, and welcome to the August Stuyvesant PA general meeting. We are usually we don't have an August meeting, but this has been quite a summer. So with that, we figured that this is an excellent opportunity for us to connect, and plus we have a number of things that we need to address and discuss. So thank you for joining us today. We have a number of people who join us today, and we'll introduce them as we're hearing. But I think the first thing I would like to do is that I would like to pass a baton to Dina for any of the announcements and also for a special review of the parent survey of number 3. So Dina, it's all yours.
Thank you, Alex, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for making the time to join us. As far as announcements are concerned, I'm encouraging you to check your emails. Last evening, there was a Chancellor's update letter that went to families in several languages, still working on getting it on the school website for you. But everything, if you miss an email, we're trying to post on the school website. We have a Return to Schools 2020 page on the Information for Parents page. You can click to it, and so check that and check the news boxes on the school website as well as the blog, and we'll keep you updated mainly through those until we start the weekly update again when we start school in September. So we did take a survey after Mr. Yu presented Stuyvesant's exception model. We asked for your opinions, and so we are briefly going to go over the results of that survey. If we can put up the presentation real briefly, I'll take you through some of the highlights and the findings of that survey. Okay, we can just go to the second slide there. There we go. So just some main highlights to go over. We had 941 parents and guardians who participated in the survey. It's not a lot, but it was a fair spread throughout all 4 grades, as we'll get to that and look at percentages. More than the reported number of families that initially said that they preferred fully remote learning reported on this survey, and there were some that felt compelled to change their minds after hearing about the proposed model. And overall, there were some top concerns that surround this plan. They are face-to-face opportunities for interaction. The bandwidth is a concern, and of course, health and safety remains a top concern. If we can go to the next slide. So who participated in this survey? As we said, there were 941 parents and guardians, and that represents about 28% of the families at Stuyvesant. And there really were no surprises here, as younger grade parents usually participate more fully, and our freshmen and sophomores have a higher participation rate. But it still wasn't even spread, because at 29% for our freshmen and 28% for our sophomores, there still were 24% for our juniors, and then 19% for the 12th grade. If we go to the next slide, we're going to break that down a little bit more. If we look at whether they were blended or remote, what is the choice? We asked families what their plans were. And while the initial reports for our school, and I'm sorry that you're hearing my cats in the background, for the initial reports for our school were 64% were choosing fully remote learners, or the 941 parents and guardians participating in this survey, 73% of them reported that their child was planning to be fully remote learners in the fall, and 21% would be blended. 6% were still not decided at the time. But we also asked whether, after hearing the proposed exception model from Principal Yu at the SLT meeting, if it changed their plans. And 79% answered no, while 7% did say yes, and 14% had not decided. Please note, though, that that's not a bad thing in that 14%, especially if you are a blended learner. So we know that our plan is still being reviewed by the district response team and the central response team. So opting into remote learning, again, is a simple thing. You can do so at any time, while opting into blended learning will only be open during the 4 predetermined times by the DOE, so the first of which would be November. So not necessarily a bad thing if you have not filled out that survey yet for remote learning. The next slide. Taking this a little further, if you spend a little bit more time on the perspective of who is answering this survey by grade, of that 21% of the blended learners that are answering the survey, 34% were our freshmen and 19% were in grade 10, 14% in grade 11, and 12% are in grade 12. So just keep in mind that 73% of those answering this survey are remote learners, and 21% are blended. So when we're speaking about the levels of satisfaction in a couple more slides with the building plan and operational plans, these are the 73% are not actually reporting unless they opt back into the building at those predetermined times. It's the 21% that are coming into the building in the fall that are answering this survey, and possibly some of the 6% that are undecided, depending on whether or not they didn't fill out the survey yet. Another interesting item to point out is that the exception model influenced families to change their minds equally. A little over 13% of those planning to attend the blended model, as well as a little over 13% of those planning to be fully remote, both felt that the plan influenced them, and then it was overall that 14% were influenced in their decision. Of course, 79% of the respondents were not changing their decision, which is also not surprising. Next slide. So some of the questions that we asked were about how happy everyone was with the exception modeled. And when we asked how satisfied you were with the course availability, we were referring to the availability that the exception model afforded in opening up 75% of our original course catalog to students. I know there was a little bit of confusion, some questions that came in about this because there still wasn't an actual list of courses available, but it was more or less based on now. Previously, there would have only been graduation requirements, AP courses, and we were virtually needing to cut every elective class. But in this exception model, we were able to offer about 75% of the original course catalog. And overall, 85% of the respondents were satisfied. 93% of those respondents were blended learners and 83% were remote. So whether you were blended or remote, having more course choices was, of course, very important to our community. So that made people happy. The next slide. So how satisfied were you with health and safety? Now, we realize that there are many STI-specific operational aspects that are still being questioned. However, there has been since released much information from the DOE through the Chancellor's update yesterday, the Return to Schools page that's on our website, the FAQ on Talos, that we've separated them now. One is on health and safety and one is on general questions. So please be sure to check those, and also on the DOE website. So as more information comes, we are going to make that available to you. But in this question, overall, 84% were satisfied. 94% of them were blended, and which is of special note since they are the ones that are primarily affected by this coming into the building in the fall. And next slide. So how satisfied are you with the building organization and attending? And by that we mean in the pods and in the locations in the building. And this question not only had to do with the structure of the pods and their locations, but it also touched on those questions surrounding networking and the bandwidth that seems to be a very large concern. And overall, 81% reported they were satisfied. But it did reflect the highest level of uncertainty in the survey. Of all of our questions, 19% were feeling that they really did need more information. Next slide. How satisfied are you with the improvement in instruction? We know that 81% overall expressed satisfaction with this, yet there is a high level here as well of uncertainty at 18%, as questions about Stuy-PA's live instruction and the expectations and improvements over the spring term were expressed in the comments. There were many that expressed their concern, and we'll get into that a little bit more as we talk about the challenges. If you move to the next slide. So Mr. Yu brought out that this plan is not without imperfections, and we are trying to make improvements. And so some of the challenges that the respondents to this survey expressed were, we're going to go through them in the order of importance. 42% felt that health and safety in the building were a concern. So that includes ventilation concerns and PPE and more. 37% felt that the bandwidth and the streaming structures of the building and the network need testing and also more support from the DOE. 37% of families are concerned with the lack of in-person and face-to-face instruction from teachers and interaction. Next slide. 25% felt that socialization and after-school activities were a concern, and the freedom to move about the building and how that would be handled with students. 15% are worried about limited in-person social emotional counseling opportunities. 13% felt that the model's challenges would be worked out, and there really are no roadblocks to the plan. And there were another 10% that had an additional other concern that was listed in the comments. So we are trying to work through all of those challenges. Next slide. So now we have some outstanding questions, and I know that there will continue to be more questions and more answers that are provided until we get through this. So how can the curriculum be covered in 50 minutes every other day? We know that there is a periods 1 through 5 on day 1 and periods 6 through 10 on day 2, 50-minute periods with 10 minutes between. And so there was a fear expressed with classes meeting every other day. How would they cover curriculum? There was a question about blended students were expected in-person experiences, which they felt this was not. Why are both models a remote learning experience? So people were a little disappointed about the remote experience inside of the building, but we feel that there's still socialization with other students inside of the building, and on their way to and from school, opportunities for office hours, engaging with teachers and staff in the pods. And teachers don't teach all periods. So as people are comfortable socially distanced, we're hoping for more interaction between students and teachers. What improvements to the remote learning experience are there, and what are the grading, homework, and instructional expectations of teachers and students? We know this is very important to our families, and perhaps Mr. Yu can detail plans that he's made later on. We have been speaking in cabinet. The APs are hard at work with teachers on remote grading policies. Academic honesty policy is being worked on with a remote portion. Teachers have been engaging in PD on their own during the summer and exchanging ideas. And we hope to get greater clarity from the DOE on live synchronous instruction as well. Specificity on Stuy-PA's PPE, ventilation, health, and safety are desired. So as I said before, as we get more details on health and safety from the DOE, we will have time to make these specific operational plans, and they are in the process in the building. So next slide. So what are our next steps? I guess those two words really kind of sum it up, and it's what we've been doing all summer, to stay tuned. We're really doing the best we can to keep you informed with as much information as possible as quickly as it comes in. And so please do stay tuned, and we will keep that information coming to you. We'll keep you updated as soon as we get information from the district and central response teams. Mr. Yu will keep us completely updated. And there is one more return to school family and student information session on August 27th. And we'll send out that link to you so that you don't have to try and screenshot the slide or anything on the Learn DOE site from the Chancellor. And I know that I asked if there were any questions that maybe have come in. I see one question in the chat that was placed. Will college admission counselors be available to students remotely? So yes, both college counselors and social emotional counselors will be continue their availability to students. Both remote and blended learners will be able to have access to their college counselors, to their and to their guidance counselors. So Joanne, were there any more questions that had come in?
Yes, there's one more question. I will read it out to you.
Sure.
Just a second. I'm juggling between the screens and I got a little confused. The question is, how do uprising juniors get to know their teachers well from a remote class? How can STY students get letters of recommendation?
Yeah, that's a real concern, and feel free to jump in anytime you want, Mr. Yu. It's a real concern, not just of juniors to get to know your teachers, but also a great concern of our freshmen as they're coming in not knowing any one of our teachers. So we're hoping that there will be opportunities for face-to-face interactions on cameras, synchronous learning. And juniors are at an advantage as well with their college applications. And I'm sure that Mr. Macris is going to reach out via email and give tips on how to get letters of recommendation, as well as the rest of the college office. But they do have other teachers that they've had at Stuy to call upon for those letters of rec. I know that traditionally Stuy students want their junior teachers, but there have been a lot of relationships that have grown strong in the remote learning environment as well. So having built relationships for 2 years at Stuy so far, and hopefully we'll go back in the spring, there'll be opportunities.
Yep. And just to chime in as well as what Ms. Ingram said, our first few weeks are really going to have to be about relationship building, particularly for our freshmen and of course for all our students in general. We haven't seen our students in a while, and we've engaged with them remotely, and so we're going to have to spend time in the first several weeks really thinking about how we establish those relationships and those interactions. We do know and are clearly aware that those initial engagements with the young people will be important, because it's going to set the stage for their participation throughout the year. And so we will have an emphasis on the first several weeks about how are teachers engaging with their students, the communication vehicles in which they are engaging with them, and giving them opportunity to also engage with one another. I saw some work that teachers had done where they had check-ins and students got to, a question was posed to the students and students answered them and they shared it. And, again, they were having to be very innovative about the mechanism in which they were sharing their thoughts and their feelings, but it's an opportunity to allow students to interact, even if it's in written form. And I do think that's going to be really important. We're going to have to look at that, particularly in the point of, are there places incrementally where we can have folks and our teachers focus on the relationship building, because again, we imagine it's been tremendously difficult being away from school and then setting the stage for what this school year will look like. In addition to the recommendations, it's clear to me that many families are worried, particularly for their juniors and their seniors. I know that this will be an important time, particularly with higher education institutions making a lot of adjustments to the class of 2020 and the class of 21 or class of 21. And really thinking about what are going to be the requirements. And so we'll have to be very mindful about making sure that students and families are well aware of the admissions changes or updates, as well as thinking about, again, how do we ensure that students do have all of their requirements and recommendations so they can put forth a very competitive application as we move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Yu. There's one question for students that are going 100% remote. How are they getting the schedule of classes? Same as blended model. And yes, at Stuy, this schedule is interchangeable, so you'll be getting the schedule in the same manner. Mr. Cheng will be programming, and your schedule hopefully will be able to appear on Talos. We'll have to work out some details with the 1 to 5, 6 to 10, and software programming. But we will get you that schedule. I mean, even if it appears as a 1 to 10, you will know that it is. We will also give you information on where you're assigned in the building, what pod you're assigned to, but that will all come shortly before school begins. And not for remote if you won't be assigned to a place in the building. And I think that may be, Joanne, I think that may be all the questions.
I think there was one
There are a
question.
few more questions, but I think we may hold them for Mr. Yu.
Perfect.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dina. Thank you for joining us. We are going to move to the next part of our meeting, and as you many of you you should have all as meeting participants, you should have received a link to the meeting materials, to the folder with meeting materials, so where you can find our agenda. So the next we're moving to the treasurer's report. Give me 1 second before, and we have Belinda who joined us to help. And just give me 1 second, let me share my screen with information. All right, Belinda, all to you.
Hello, everyone. We are going to present the financials ended June 30, 2020. The net income was 129,000 for year to date, ended June 30, 2020, compared with a loss of 47,000 in 2019. This is mainly due to increase of 106,000 in annual appeal and matching gifts compared to 2019. The strong annual appeal will be very important in supporting the school for the next school year due to the DOE budget cut. PA has allocated some funds for items that would normally be supported by DOE, such as Narians, Jupiter, and Talos. So let me know if there are any questions on the financials. I know if someone on the phone, it could be very small to read. So please feel free to contact me at financials@stuy-pa.org for any questions that you have on the financials. Thank you.
Thank you, Belinda. And just to point out, so everyone has a link to our financials. They can review them in larger font, and we apologize for sharing what we did on the screen. But with that, I actually want to continue with the topic that Belinda brought up and move to the next section. So as Belinda pointed out, and as you all, many of you recall, back in June, we put together preliminary budget for this coming school year. But as you can imagine, while that budget we spent a lot of time working at it and thinking it through, little did we know. So a couple of months now, 2 months later, we come to the realization that we're heading into a very different school year, which pretty much means that we need to spend more time to review whether our focus is right, whether PA and where PA should be spending the money. So for that reason, we are still on target to come back with the final budget for September 15th business meeting. That's where we'll bring it up and it will be open for final approval. However, between now and September 15th, there are a number of expenses that become significantly more urgent than ever before. We were never in this situation during previous years. So as you recall, on June 29th, we had a special meeting where we had an approval, we obtained a voting, and we obtained a general body approval to spend over 88,000 to cover some special systems and start doing this literally as early as in July. We're working closely with Dr. Haber and Principal Yu on identifying those systems and making sure that we are questioning where we're spending the money, if there are any opportunity for consolidation. And we've started that process. But it's good that we had that approval, because it allows us to start paying some of those bills and leave more of school budget to focus on where we need the funds. However, with that was a very targeted spending. But as you can imagine, as we started talking through school reopening, there are a number of items that start coming to mind, including bandwidth potentially, or dividers, or chargers, or potentially additional devices, things that will help support us the school reopening that would require spending, not waiting until mid-September. It would require looking at that much earlier. So with that, what we would like to put forward with discussion internally, would like to put forward a proposal vote to, let me just bring this on my screen, vote to propose an additional expenditure that was originally part, just share my screen, that was part of the, sorry, let me just give me 1 second. I just would like to bring this, oops, here it goes. An additional expenditure. So our preliminary budget that you can see on the screen, while some of these accounts and the focus will likely change or may change, there's a section which is the principals fund, and the principals fund in the preliminary budget includes student support fund, principal discretionary fund of 40,000, professional development fund of 20,000, that, as you, I'm sure, all imagine, this year will become even more of a focus with our interest, and particularly all of us interested to see remote learning being more effective, of better quality, as well as special discretionary fund for 2021. Altogether, all these accounts totaling to 91,700. So that was part of our preliminary budget, but because we never had a final vote, we're putting a proposal forward to actually approve this for spending, and thus make these funds, PA funds, available for Principal U to start targeting for various things that are related to school opening that fit into these categories. And again, as I mentioned, this is related to both remote learners and blended learners. And it's both the quality of education, additional systems that potentially have not been part of that were a part of that approved list. Possibly I will ask Principal Yu to comment further on where do you see and potentially urgency issues with if these funds availability, if you don't mind, before we open this for questions and voting.
Sure. I mean, I've heard loud and clear that the remote instruction or the remote learning experience was one where I think we all want to strengthen that because we know that might become part of education from this point on. And it's going to be important that our teachers have the support and the expertise to deliver instruction remotely. And so, I think there's a few places that I'm envisioning. One is we need to ensure that our teachers and our entire staff have a foundation just with the use of technology, whether it is the use of Google or a variety of other platforms, and how to use it to its fullest. And that takes time, it takes practice, it takes trainings, and those are all really important because many of the new platforms that are coming or becoming available, even ones that are grading platforms, offer a variety of services and supports in which, again, I think these are places where teachers and staff members need to have a better understanding. We really want to focus on that because we do believe teachers need that experience, need the practice, and need that expertise. And we also want to be very specific, and this is why we're working with the cabinet to determine, like, are there subject-specific professional development that our teachers are going to need, not only at the beginning of the year, but throughout the entire year. And so we're having to examine all the professional development opportunities. Some of that's being done internally with teachers sharing some of the expertise and some of the experiences that they learned that we felt went really well. But there's also outside vendors who we know also provide those services, and really being able to leverage them as well. This is an approach that we're working with our cabinet and our assistant principals. So they in turn are working with their departments to determine what are the different platforms and/or software and/or professional development services that are available, so that our teachers can be ready to ensure that there is a strengthening of our remote learning experience for young people. The other thing too, just around some of the use of funds, we had been speaking with Alex and really looking at, like, what are the possible places in which we will need to think about the use of these funds, whether it's looking at chargers or even dividers. There's a number of places in which, not necessarily knickknacks per se, but there are important pieces of equipment that we know will create greater efficiency and effectiveness of the experience in general. And so those are things that we're having to closely examine to make sure that, again, that the plan that we've put forth will be feasible, and that we can do that as well as possible, because we're putting things in place, again, and thinking about those additional costs and/or supplies or equipment that can make the experience that much richer. And I know, just again, that idea of a charger may not be like, well, but it's an important piece of equipment that will make or break the experience when students are in our building. And so, those are the things that we're discussing and looking at what our inventory is to determine how to best utilize and maximize the funding that is available.
Thank you very much, Principal Yu. Let's see. I would like to check if we have any questions on the proposed expenditure. So again, just to remind everyone what we're asking for. This is the vote to approve the expenditure of $91,700 that were initially listed in the principal's discretionary fund of the Parents Association. But this approval is to enable principal to start using these funds according to the categories assigned before September 15th. And that will be the time when we will be approving the final budget for the PA. Joanne, please let me know if we have any questions, or if not, then I would need to take a motion to move this for voting. So with that, I think I just quickly checked. Looks like there are no questions. Thank you. So we are opening the form. The Google form should be used for voting. That form is located right in the under the live stream link, and it's just been posted in the chat of the of our live stream. So with that, we are going to open the voting. Please use that link. We need your help to get this approved. And as we are proceeding with this, the form will be open through the end of this meeting, and we'll close it at 8:30 this evening. Moving on to the next section. With that, I think I would like to ask, we have Rima Roy, who joined us. She's a fellow parent, and she is here as a member of the Stuy-PA nominations committee. So Rima, I'm passing it on to you.
Thank you, Alex. And I just mainly wanted to remind everyone that's participating in the meeting that we will be having our Parent Association elections on September 15th. The notice of elections has been posted at stuy-pa.org. It's also, you can get to the PA website from our stuy.eu website. And we would really very much encourage parents to, particularly in this year, to assist with, to participate. And I think the best way to participate is really to run for offices. There are, all of the offices are available for you to nominate, to submit a nominations form, which is available with the notice of elections. So we welcome all parents from all grades to be more actively engaged with joining us in the PA.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So just to remind everyone, the link for the election and nominations form is on the website, but it's also on the agenda. So you can also, if you open that document, you can find it there. And I know we have a number of positions opened, and one specific position that I want to highlight or feature is that we're definitely looking to help. We're looking for a treasurer for next year. It's an extraordinarily important role, and Belinda has done a phenomenal job over the last couple of years. She would like to pass this role to the next person. We're opening a call for some experienced, preferably CPA, who is willing to donate their time and help PA move forward. But that's not to diminish the roles, all other roles on the committee. So yes, thank you very much, Rima. Thank you. I also would like to mention, so yes, running for elections is one of the ways how you can get involved, but you can also just be part of one of the Stuy-EB committees. And in order to do it, please, there's again the link on your agenda, and there's a link on the Stuy-PA website where you can basically, if you would like to volunteer, just fill it out, indicate where you would like to get involved, or just simply write to the contact PA email address, and we'll connect you. This is another great way. If you feel that maybe you don't want to devote all the time to the elected role, then committee is another great way to get involved. Before I move on to our very much anticipated section of asking Principal Yu a lot of questions, I also want to mention that our Spirit Wear team just moved the t-shirts and soon sweatshirts. They moved them online, so now you can actually order them using the link on the PA website. Again, there you can buy them through eBay. And no, I know there's a misconception. A couple of people said, well, does it mean they're used? No, they're brand new. They're all there. The beauty is that we're using eBay's infrastructure, and huge thank you to our Spirit Wear committee and their dedicated work, packing and shipping. Please support them. Please make it all worth their time. This is another great way of doing it. Again, the link is on your agenda, and it's also on the PA website. And one other point I wanted to bring up, we talk quite a bit about fundraising. Yes, this year, fundraising is going to be probably, I mean, it always has been incredibly critical for Stuy because our community is amazingly involved and very generous. But I think this is a very special year. So I just want to make sure that I bring this to your attention. Yes, Stuy-PA annual appeal is starting in August this year. Yes, we are asking for you to consider donating. The target amount is $750 per student, but it's really, our goal is 100% participation, but that does not mean that we expect every family to donate that much. If you can donate that or more, terrific. If you cannot, we completely understand. Please, no amount is too small. So whether it's $10, whether it's $20, whether it's 200, that whatever you as a family can afford, that would really make a difference. And the way you can do it is please go to the stuy-pa.org and find the button says click here to donate. And that will bring you to the website. You can donate with your credit card. You can donate using Zelle. You can send us a check, and we'll work out the logistics how to get the check from the school. So we'll make it all happen. It just I think this is the time for us to all step in. And obviously, in this process, please don't forget the matching gifts. That is an amazing way to increase the amount of your donations. So with that, I think one last thing I ought to mention, I apologize, Amazon. So that's yet another way you can contribute, and at absolutely no cost to you. So there is a link on the stuy-pa.org website. Please click on it every time when you shop, bookmark it. A large percentage of that actually goes to Stuy-PA at absolutely no cost to you. So it's an amazingly wonderful freebie. Please, please, please don't forget to use it. I know we all are trying our best. So with that, I'm actually moving to our feature presentation. Principal Yu, huge thank you for joining us today. I know joining Stuy at such time is likely may feel quite overwhelming, but we're really, really happy to have you. And maybe what we'll do, we have a list of questions and more coming through live stream. Some are about you, some are about your vision of Stuy, some are about school reopening. So maybe we'll ask you first, maybe to learn firsthand about you.
Sure.
That would be amazing. Thank you.
Sure. I will. Well, one, thank you very much to the Parents Association. It really is an honor to be here to listen and clearly see the work that's happening and that has happened over the course of the past year, particularly in light of everything with COVID-19. And I really appreciate the fact that there are opportunities to contribute in whatever way that you can. I think that's tremendously important. And one of the reasons why I wanted to join the Stuyvesant community because of the investment of families and the different ways to demonstrate the investment. Tonight's a really great opportunity for me to be able to share a little bit more about myself. I know there are a number of questions that many of you have, and I think we'll get to as many as we can. But I think it's also important that you know a little bit about me. I got to see and understand that there's a level of who is this gentleman who's going to be the principal, and rightfully so. I think it's important that you know a little bit about who I am, how I lead, and kind of my vision around the work. But I'll start with this, and I think this is really an important piece because it's had a huge impact on my life. And I think I might have said this before, but I absolutely loved high school. And granted, that was a long time ago for me. I won't state the year, but it was a really incredible time because as a young person who was ready to be influenced and ready to be impacted, I got an experience in my 4 years in which I had adults, particularly the teachers and coaches and entire staff who just surrounded me with a lot of love, a lot of high expectations, and just a level of encouragement that made me feel that I could do anything that I wanted, particularly if I worked hard and if there were opportunities that I could pursue. I try to take advantage of that because, in addition to the adults that were in the school, my family who immigrated from South Korea, that was something that was very important to them, like many of, not all of you, in terms of the type of experience you want your son or daughter to experience, and using that as a springboard. My parents were the same way. They wanted me to make sure that I took advantage of the opportunities, and there wasn't a single day that my father and my mother didn't tell me about the value of education, and particularly being an immigrant. And my two parents not being able to speak English when they first arrived, they said that was going to be my lever to have a career and to be able to make it in the United States. And so I took that to heart and tried to make sure that I was able to meet that expectation. And so in high school, unfortunately for me, I have 3 older sisters who really set the path for me, which I'm grateful for. But in high school, I try to take advantage of all the opportunities, from extracurricular activities to sports to clearly the academics. And I don't know if you all remember in high school, but in my high school, applying for college was done at home, and I was fortunate that I had 3 older sisters who had already experienced that and could give me and guide me with that process. And that was really important, because particularly in high school, if you're not sure what to do, you have to be surrounded by people who are willing to mentor you, who are willing to show you the ropes, and just overall surround you with encouragement. And that's what happened to me in high school. I played a lot of sports. My coaches were incredible. Did a lot of activities, did a lot of leadership opportunities. I was a student body president, and then I was in my top 10 of my class academically. So I felt like I really took advantage of high school, and it really was a springboard for everything that I've done now. While I can't remember all the things that I did academically, I remember reading Beowulf and the Heroic Journey. And in many ways, that was something that was instilled with me because of all the adults who talked about journeys. And I was really lucky to experience that. But I tell you that because that is what I want to do as an educator. I want to surround our young people with really caring adults, and I call it the fandom, where we are always encouraging young people, setting high expectations, but providing them with the support to pursue choices that they get to make. I'm a big believer in providing as much information as we can so that our young people can make the choices that are informed. And in many cases, some of the choices will be really, really good decisions, and some of them may not necessarily be the best decisions, but those are learning opportunities. And I was fortunate that I got to experience that in high school and throughout my life. And that's something that I want to instill in Stuyvesant, is to make sure that kids understand the choices that they're making with the information that they have available to them, even if they are very challenging decisions. And as an educator, that's been my whole philosophy, from the school that I founded to how I've worked in the central office to now where I am now at Stuyvesant. I want young people to have choices. I want them to have the opportunities to be able to unleash their many talents, some of which they know, some of which they may not even know. And that all revolves around, can we surround our young people with the encouragement that I think is tremendously important. I think being a high school student right now is tremendously challenging, whether it's in COVID-19 or just being a teenager in general. They're bombarded with a plethora of information, and they have to synthesize and decipher whether or not that information is accurate, and then actually apply it. And I think, thinking about my own high school career, I didn't have to deal with that. I didn't have to deal with cell phones. I didn't have to, worry about the bombardment of too much information. And that's something that we have to help young people to balance, because their access to information is just a tweet away. And an article, and we've got to examine it much closer. But these are the things that I really want to build on, and I believe that's already happening at Stuyvesant. I want to be able to help improve on it, to strengthen it, and to grow it. And I think that's something that's really important for me as an educator, as a father to 2 young daughters. And I do think, again, that's an important place where, as our young people navigate high school, they're also navigating what's going to happen after high school and what the world is going to look like for them. That's tremendously important to me, particularly in light of the decisions that they're going to have to make, many of which will be really challenging and difficult. And so we've got to do everything we can to expose them and to give them the insights to be able to make really informed decisions. And so as I think about coming into Stuyvesant, I know we have some very talented, brilliant young adults, and our question is, how are we going to add value to their lives? And I believe we can definitely do that. We've got an incredible staff who have been doing that, and I do believe our young people want to be influenced, and they want to be recognized and acknowledged. And I know that that's something that our staff can do, and we can do continue to improve on that, so that young people do feel that they have a voice, that they really are seen in our community, and then most importantly, that they actually feel very relevant, which will then be the springboard for them to do anything and everything that they'd like to pursue. So I know there's a lot more questions, but I wanted to share a little bit of that because that is a philosophy that I hold dear, and one of which that I hope you will be able to see every day, because that's what I want to demonstrate in my time at Stuyvesant, and working with the young people and the adults, as we continue this journey. So a little bit about me, and I'll stop there because I'm sure there's plenty of questions that you might want to ask.
Thank you so much, Principal Yu. Yes, indeed, we have a lot of questions. So I guess let's cover a few more about Principal Yu. Well, let me start light. Do you envision your daughters applying to Stuy in the future?
Great question. I will, and by the time they're in that age, I want them to be informed about what their choices are. I want them to be able to make that decision. I imagine me assuming I'll be the principal still, that might influence some of their decisions. But I want them to have as many options as possible. And if they think Stuyvesant is a good place for them, I would absolutely want them to pursue that option. But I would also be very understanding that maybe they don't want to be near their dad, during their 4 years or in their high school experience. But I'd want them to know what the experience could be like by showing them at an early age what Stuyvesant has to offer.
Thank you. I guess so. A little bit about your previous jobs. So
Yeah.
why did you were a principal for 4 years? Why did you leave your previous job as a principal and went to the Central DOE?
Yeah. So I was the founding principal at the Academy of Software Engineering. Got to see 2 graduating classes, and really started the school from ground up. It was an amazing experience to be able to assemble a team, to be able to think about every single decision to make a school come into fruition. I absolutely loved the experience. But during that time, I also got married. In my first year, I had a baby the second year, and then my 4th year also had our second child. It was really an incredible journey, one of which that was tremendously busy. And I was getting into a place where I really was also looking for inspiration. I had it in my family, but I think there comes a time when you look at leadership, and that's something I think I've expressed that's very important to me. I had an opportunity to move over to the central office to work for a mentor who was my first principal, and then who really helped me in all my professional journey in New York City. It was a time where I really wanted to work for him, and I was offered that opportunity. And really, that's the reason why I moved over, because I wanted to work for him again, to continue my learning and my journey. And it was also an opportunity to be able to think about my family as well, and seeing my girls, particularly in kindergarten and in their early stages, to be able to have a little bit more flexibility with my time. And that's really the reason why I moved over, to broaden my perspective, think about my family, and to work for someone who I really admire and respect.
Thank you for that. One sort of crossover question. So it is about Principal Yu, or rather, this is how we would like to learn more about Principal Yu, but it's also about Stuy. So what specific Stuyvesant traditions that you already learned about, you already know maybe your favorite, or you anticipate them to be really excited about, and which ones you're really not that thrilled about yet. And again, we hope to also see that as an indication what you're really into it and what you know.
So in the many conversations I've had, particularly with the young people, they've always described and talked about singing. And the way they talk about it, their eyes light up. They talk about the role that they have and how it really galvanizes the entire school community. I haven't even seen it, but the way that it's spoken about by the students really gets me excited. What I love about it is the idea of students taking control. They are the ones who determine this. They make it come into fruition. And really, they get to be the ones who create this incredible opportunity. I am a big believer in that. We want our young people to create. We want our young people to take control, to make key decisions. And that's something that I would say, particularly in the light of the fact that it galvanizes the entire community, really is inspiring. I think we need more of those types of activities where we bring the school community together to be able to see young people really shine. And I talk about that because I know there are many things that that Stuyvesant has, but that one in particular, in my conversation, seems to be at the forefront. I am a big proponent of kids having choices and being able to create, as I made mention, because when they do, the creativity comes out. And I think there's a lot to learn when you have those challenges of having to work with other people who have, strong positions and or want to make the decisions. I think it teaches a lot. I think it teaches young people a lot about how you compromise, how do you get to consensus, how do you get to certain decisions, and then to be able to do it within a time frame. I mean, I liken it to what I got to experience just recently over the past few days. But I would say any activity that allows students to do that is what I'm a big fan of. I don't know of any of the experiences so far, or traditions that I'm not a big fan of yet. I'm sure once I get to experience it, then I could probably opine on that. But right now, I would just say that everything that I'm going to push for is let's give kids choices, let them make those choices, and let's let their creativity really shine, because I think we'll be utterly amazed. I'm sure as all of you are and were when you got to see, and see the performance from our young people.
Thank you. Thank you. So moving to the next question. What are the 3 most important things you can implement to make the Stuy educational experience one that you envision, and why for each of the 3?
I go back to what I just said around all of the different learning opportunities, whether it happens within a classroom or whether it happens in the auditorium or whether it happens through PSAL. This idea to create and really give students an opportunity to produce artifacts or things, I think is really important. At the Academy of Software Engineering, a previous school, that was a really big belief. We want folks to create. We want young people to create. We just don't want them to be consumers of everything that is available, but rather the producers, the creators of those things. And I know our young people in Stuyvesant are just that. They're creators. We just got to create those conditions to allow them to do that. That is something that's important to me. We got to see that with a number of students who are in competitions and or part of these activities that maybe not necessarily happening in the classroom, but are happening within the periphery of the school. So that's something I want to continue. I want us to be able to focus on allowing kids to demonstrate their learning, to demonstrate ways in which they get to create and apply what they're learning into a potential product or an artifact. So that's one. The other thing is, I know we are a very college-focused high school, college prep high school. I think we're seeing a lot of changes in education, both in K through 12 as well as in higher education. One of the things that we tend to hear or we have heard is the preparation of young people into the workforce. And, one of the things that when I started the other school, there were always questions like young people can go from high school to the workforce. And for some students and families, that is an option, and that is something that if it's in their best interest, they might pursue. What I want to make sure of is that our young people are prepared to have multiple options. Ideally, it's going, and being able to have options around post-secondary education, whether it's, again, 2 or 4 year institutions or other educational institutions that allow students to really hone in on the things that they're interested in, but also that allows them to find self-sufficiency economically. I think those are all really important. So we want to learn from industry. We want to learn from what is going to allow students to be successful in the workforce. I think there's a tremendous learning that happens in college, both about your identity as well as some of the technical skills and the social emotional. But there's also a lot of those skill sets that you're going to need in the workforce. And so to learn from professionals in the workforce from a variety of industries, I think are really important. I know we have an internship program, and I really want to think about how we continue to leverage that. Our alumni association, our families, I think represent so many different industries. We should be leveraging that as much as we can, because those are the skill sets that what we know for the 21st century are really going to be important, from the social skills or the soft skills to those technical skills. And we need to find the right balance. I think that's going to be tremendously important to ensure that young people not only can perhaps, again, code, but at the same time, how do you explain your coding or any of those particular technical skills when you have to convince a group or a team that that's the right decision to move forward. So, again, I think bringing that into our robust academic program will be really important. And then the last thing I would just say is just, again, I'm a big believer in leadership. I think young people need to have opportunities to lead as well as follow. But, these leadership roles, I think, are tremendously important. I think there's opportunities where, again, having places in which our young people are positioned to be able to make decisions on behalf of our school community, I think are challenging, but also so influential in kind of their next steps. I mean, I got to see that with a lot of our young people now that are wanting to develop policy that will be implemented in our school. I think those are really important. And how do you represent your constituents or your stakeholders in a way that you are providing them voice, because you're privileged to be in a position to represent their wants, their needs, while also balancing out with the larger community. So I really think that's an important piece that I'd like to bring in, not only for the young people, but also the adults. I think this is a really great opportunity where we need leadership more than ever. And so bringing that into Stuyvesant, and I know that's already happening, and there's plenty of places, but to be able to really hone in on that, I think will be important.
Thank you. Jumping into quite a controversial question. So I think there will be plenty of that. So what is your view on SHSAT, and what are your thoughts? Do you believe in tests and standardized tests, and what is your view on their effectiveness?
Yeah. This has been clearly a conversation and topic that the city is looking at with a number of different opinions. What I understand and know right now is, the examination and admissions into specialized high schools are governed by the state, and that's currently what we're following. I think it's important, and me as a principal, is that I can only control what I can control, and what I control is the students that are in Stuyvesant. I think my job is to ensure that under the current conditions that we do what many high schools do, which is to ensure that students, middle schools, and the students who are going to be applying to high school know what is available at Stuyvesant High School. I think it's really important that, again, we want to ensure that families have a strong understanding of what is it that Stuyvesant offers. what are the opportunities from an academic to extracurricular to leadership? And I think it's my job, along with the school's job, to make sure that all the middle schools in all 5 boroughs know what are the possibilities, what are the opportunities available at Stuyvesant High School. To be very clear on the requirements that currently that we have, and what it will take to do well and perform on that particular requirement. I think that's my imperative, is to make sure that we are being able to ensure that multiple and middle schools are aware, and so that everyone has an opportunity to fulfill the requirement. And if they are able to do that, then they will, be able to come to Stuyvesant High School. In terms of examinations and assessments, yeah, I think there are multiple ways that demonstrate a student's ability of what they've learned and their talents. And I do recognize, just like when I went to graduate school, that there are standardized examinations that we have to fulfill. So, whether I personally believe, that the MAT that I had to take to get into my doctoral program, whatever my personal feelings were, I still had to take that examination in order to meet the requirement of being admitted. And those are certain things that we work under. Those are certain constructs that we're working under, that these examinations do exist. But I would like to see, not necessarily just for the specialized exam, but just overall, like, what are the different ways that we are evaluating young people and what they know, and what they can, and how to apply their knowledge. I think it's really important, particularly since we know that our young people at Stuyvesant are not only strong academically, but they have a multitude of talents, and we want to be able to see how they can demonstrate that. So if we are really trying to identify talent, as well as ensuring that we can really support them in those endeavors, then we need to think about the ways that we're allowing kids to demonstrate it.
Thank you. Another somewhat controversial question. During the periods of the previous leadership has shown a willingness to change a culture that at Stuyvesant in many instances resulted in students with disabilities, TUIs, and other neurodiverse learners encountering a lack of understanding, incorrect assumptions about their intelligence, and in some cases even experiences unwillingness to comply with IEP and 504 accommodations. What will you do to address these issues and to ensure an inclusive education for all students at Stuy?
Yeah, great question. At Stuyvesant, and this is what I've learned about our community, is that we're an inclusive community, and students demonstrate their learning in a multitude of ways. It's our job as educators to fulfill our legal obligations. And whether a student has an IEP or a 504 accommodation, we need to ensure that, because they are a student of Stuyvesant High School, and we want to make sure that they have the same opportunities that are available to our student body. I think it's important, and to build on the work that's previously happened. I know that Ms. Ingram and Ms. Pedrick and former Principal Contreras was working with the PA and really thinking about how do we get the involvement and voice of our community to ensure that we are a place that's inclusive, that we are looking at ways of strengthening how we're serving all young people, regardless of whether or not they're identified as having an IEP or not. I think those are really important pieces of information that allow us to do our job better and allow us to be able to showcase and have our young people recognize that they are talented, they have skill sets, they just may need to show it in a different way. And that's something that we have to continue to improve on and work on. And I think, again, the more that we can inform each other, the more that we can have those discussions, the better off we'll be, because that's going to be applicable for every student in respects to their own uniqueness. So I want to build on the great work that's already been happening. I know that there's been conversations around the work that Ms. Ingram, Ms. Pedrick, and former Principal Contreras and many parents who are heavily involved in this. I think the more ways that we can continue to build our capacity and understanding of ways in which we can service our young people is indeed the route to go. We are inclusive, as we should be, because again, I think what makes us an amazing institution is that our young people come in with many talents, and our job is to create those conditions that allow them to unleash it.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that answer. We're moving on to the category related to school reopening. You knew, I mean, the way our meeting started,
Yep.
there were a lot of questions, and many of them are just need clarification or repeating,
Yep.
because we have new parents joining us, and
Yep.
it's very important to make sure that everyone is well educated. So I guess the first question is, well, let's start easy. When will the 2020-2021 school year calendar get published?
That is a great question that we are still waiting from the Department of Education to provide. I know, again, there is great anticipation for that. I know that puts families in challenging situations, particularly if they're not in New York City right now, particularly with the fact that many states are on the list of to be quarantined if you are not in New York City. So, you know, we've made, I know the Department of Education is aware of that, and the sooner that we can get that calendar out and made available will be tremendously valuable for all families. It's still not determined yet when the school year will start. It's been anticipated that it will be September 10th, but again, it's not official yet. Once we get that school calendar, we will make sure we blast it out. Ms. Ingram will ensure that families are aware, but we are waiting with bated breath for that calendar, and hopefully it will come out very soon.
I know. I actually, I'm among those who are anxiously checking their website every day,
Yep.
because we can't really get the PA calendar up until that is fully clarified. So
Yep.
yes, thank you. Kind of going to the next question, which is coming from a parent. Welcome to Stuy. Thanks for coming during these challenging times. Can you please tell us, if we sign up for all online for next year, how many and what percentage of the teachers will be Stuy teachers?
That's great. So our Stuyvesant exception proposal was trying to account for that. As I had heard, there was some trepidation on whether or not who would be teaching our students. There's still some level of uncertainty that I think recently was made around whether or not there would be a guarantee that the students would be taught by their teachers. We were uncertain about that possibility, which is why we put forth the model that we did to ensure that whether you are a student who is remote or coming into our building, that you would be taught by a Stuyvesant teacher. We felt that that was really important, that, you know, we don't know what the accommodations and or medical accommodations, how many will be approved, you know, and then what that means for our teaching staff. And then we're still waiting on some of the labor negotiations between the unions and the city and Department of Education around what's going to be acceptable, who teaches what, whether it's remote or in person. And so we want to account for that. So our expectation based upon our model is that our students would be taught by Stuyvesant teachers because we built that into the model itself.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. What can we expect in terms of after-school activities and club? When will more details be available regarding these schedules, possibilities of online or in-person classes?
You know, that's a really great question, and I know that's a big part of our school community. Is what are the different ways that young people can socialize, can be invested in the school in different ways. These activities and extracurricular the clubs and activities are really important to me. What we've got to do right now is a few things. One is, I think in many situations, we're going to have to think about it being done remotely because of the safety of our young people, the contact tracing, all of the different ways in which, again, we have to be really mindful and disciplined around what activities we could potentially hold. And right now, it looks like those activities would most likely be done remotely so that we can have that engagement. I'm still learning about all our different supervisors of these clubs. Many of them, again, might be run by our students and can be handled that way. But, we want to be really thoughtful about how do you make sure that that experience is still robust, even from a remote, being done remotely. And then how do we ensure that it's still meeting those expectations that young people have? So this is still a work in progress. We want to have them. I'd like to see them happen. But it's also one where there does need to be coordination in this to do it well and to ensure that the experience is what we believe it should be. We're working those details out because we are going to have to check with our the adults around when they could be available for these experiences to happen. And so there's going to be a little bit more time that we're going to need for the coordination. But I do want to see them happen because I think it's important both for the young people and the adults to engage with each other, to be able to see learning continuing to happen that may not necessarily be around, key concepts of academics, but rather different ways of socializing, building those soft skills. And so once we have those details worked out and coordinated, we will be providing that as quickly as we can to families and to students.
Thank you. Thank you. Next question. What makes Stuy are the extensive course offerings, and now these will be cut to accommodate for blended learning. In other words, one of the most significant factors that makes Stuy special will be sacrificed for the sake of implementing a blended model. Would you please comment on that, specifically in light of the proposed model?
So, one of the things that's come up multiple times is this is the principal's model. That discredits all of the important work that our SLT and their subcommittees worked on to think about what, again, is a priority of Stuyvesant High School. And one of the things that continued to resonate was our ability to offer the multitude of courses that our young people want to take, particularly in their junior and senior year. So when we were looking at that and examining that, and I've said this in a number of different forums, that, as I talk to our teams and multiple stakeholders, that to retain as much as we could around our course catalog would be an important priority for me because I've heard it so much from families. This is why the model is what it is, because we were trying to account for that. And as I said before, it's imperfect, but what I had learned was that if we went to a model in which we had to follow all of those kind of restrictions, our course catalog would have been exponentially reduced. We would have had to go into more generalized courses that I think, again, from hearing what I heard across the stakeholders was really going to be detrimental to our students. So this is why when we looked at our model and came up with what we came up with, that this allowed us to maintain and retain as many of our courses as we can. There will still be some adjustments that we have to do, and our program is working this out to see what will be available and what may need to be cut. But what this model did, or was allowed, is for us to hold up to about 75% of what we believe we'll be able to offer. And so, to think about our blended model or our proposal was thinking about that. How do we ensure that we retain as many of our courses? Because particularly for our class of 21 and 22, we want to ensure that, again, particularly as our last 2 years are unfolding, we meet as many of those expectations as we can. this is why, again, I think, what I've heard, and I've gotten a lot of comments, there were some trade-offs in this. And those are the trade-offs that we knew we had to make in order to keep the type of courses that we felt were what we are hearing from the multiple stakeholders. But this is why, again, too, with the students who are coming into our building, and while that will be remote, is to think about the different ways in which, again, those interactions still happen, but also that they're getting the types of courses that they were wanting to get. And our goal is to make sure that we're able to retain as much of the course catalog as we can. So that was one of the major decision points when we put forth this exception model, which again, as we said, is imperfect, but I believe I was clear on how we were going to make decisions, and the course catalog was one of those priorities that we wanted to try to retain.
Thank you. So in the proposed model, the Stuy exception model, what is the main difference in the experience between blended learners and remote learners?
Yeah, I mean, the major difference, and it's been pointed out, is that some of our students will be in the building, and while most of our students will be at home or in another location of their choice. But the experience is that, two things that I really kind of pinpoint. One is many of our adults will be in the building as well. If our staff did not receive a medical accommodation approval, then they are expected to be in the building. And what we know is it's been several months that I imagine young people and adults have been able to engage one another. And so students and families who are making the choice to have their young person come into our building, it's going to get limited socialization, but they're going to get socialization because, one, they're going to see other young people, and will be able to engage with other young people in person safely, socially distanced, but they'll also be able to do that with staff as well. One of the things that I'm a big believer in, and I've seen this, is we are all afraid at this point to venture into that again, where seeing a number of people together is a little unsettling because we haven't done that for 5 or 6 months. I've heard from families who are going back into the office how the first several weeks are really anxiety ridden because you just haven't done that. But what I believe too, though, is that we're also human and we need levels of socialization. And I think, the key thing will be to maintain our discipline in following the safety measures while also gaining that comfort level where we're going to want to speak with other people. And when you're in that environment, just like when I went to the building, I could not wait to talk to our custodial engineer. And while we were, socially distanced, I was saying hello to everybody because I haven't had that. I expect that that's going to happen too, both with our students who are going to gain become more comfortable as they start to see their peers, and then with the adults as well. And I know every adult in our building has things that they have to individually deal with, and some, again, will most likely be a little bit more cautious than others because they may have a different situation at home. But I do believe many of our adults will also want to engage. I know I do, and I know I need to do it safely, but I can't wait to see the young people in our building because I haven't been there and I haven't done this in a long time. And I imagine many of our adults and our young people are feeling the same way.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Question about some science courses. So there are many courses in science that need to be operated in the lab. How can the students learn in this model, remote learners or blended learners? How can they learn without having that lab experience?
Yeah, the state put out regulations that, or put out guidance that labs can be done virtually or remotely because of, again, across the state, each district is going about reopening differently. So one, we know that's going to happen. And one of the things, again, as part of our model, there were trade-offs, but one of the things that we are looking to do is particularly for courses, our science courses, where demonstrations would be helpful. It's allowing our teachers to be in those rooms, whether it's our science labs or their classrooms, to be able to do those demonstrations and showcase that to our young people. It's not the same, particularly if you're at home and you don't have that equipment or you don't have the supplies. But what we do believe is that if the teacher can demonstrate that and have those opportunities, then we want to do that. And so again, it's not going to be the exact same experience when young people are able to touch flask and use the equipment. But it's our version of it that we have to reimagine because of the current situation that we're in. And I believe our teachers are going to be up to the task to do that. I think they're going to find innovative ways to do their demonstrations, to showcase labs, and to find ways that young people can think about how that happens remotely. And we have to, because again, it is a state, it's part of the state guidance that if we anticipate that regents are going to happen this year as well, that there are certain requirements that have to be followed. And so our teachers are going to be looking at that. And while again, it won't be the same experience, we do believe it will be a robust experience that allow and prepare students for any assessments that they may need to take.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Will the learning, I guess, full remote learning or blended learning, we'll have live teaching every lesson Monday to Friday?
Yeah. So, I think one of the things I did here too was, and this is across the city, our educators had to pivot very quickly to remote, which meant that both educators and families had to figure out how to make this work. There was not a blueprint, and folks were figuring it out. I think one of the things that became very apparent is, and this is something that's important because I know it happened with me. It's like, how do I manage my two young daughters while also being responsible for working with young adults who are going to rely on me for their education? And that's something that we're looking at. And a lot of what I think families had voiced was, that engagement with our educators, that not just necessarily an assignment, but there's some level of interaction, whether it's through a chat or whether there is face-to-face via Zoom or Google Meets. And I think again, our staff also recognizes that too. So our expectation, based upon what we know that's continuing around labor negotiations, is that yes, we would like to do more live instruction, because we do understand that that many of our families, many of our students want to see one another, want to see our teachers. We're waiting on the specific details about what we can and can't do. But I know that our teachers value that engagement with young people is what makes teaching. I don't believe that our educators want to just put an assignment and just say go. I think we've learned a lot from the spring. We know that there's got to be improvements in thinking about how that remote learning experience happens, and then how do we ensure that young people are being engaged? Because the last thing I also don't want is to see a young person disengaged, and we have no idea what's happening with their at home. So we've got to think about, how are we developing those relationships? How are we ensuring that students feel comfortable reaching out to our adults and staff, so that we can ensure that they feel invested, that they're getting what they need from the educational experience, but also know that there's an adult who's looking out for them. So, my expectation is that we will do live instruction, because that's also part of what the negotiations have been with the unions and the Department of Education. What we need to figure out exactly is those expectations, so that we can make that transparent to all of our families, with working with under the constructs of what we have, because as people have pointed out, technology is an issue as well. So we want to be mindful about how that engagement is going to happen productively, effectively, and one that's going to be clearly valuable for our community.
Thank you. Next question. Will Stuy offer PSAT in October 2020?
Really great question. Our last guidance that we've gotten from the Department of Education is that, and this is, sorry, I'm going to SAT, that the SAT that was scheduled for August is canceled, at least in New York City, because of our building still being closed. College Board is following all the CDC guidelines and then working with each of the districts and schools. We don't know yet for October. We're waiting word on the Department of Education of how they're going to handle that. And again, I think it's going to be interesting because of depending on where we are. Normally it's administered in the school building and during the school day. So we don't know yet. Ideally, we're going to continue to work with College Board, with the Department of Education around the guidance to see what's going to be available, how those examinations will operate, and then what are all the safety nets in terms of signing up, being informed if it's not available, and then what are, again, the ways in which we will still find opportunities for our young people to meet that requirement, particularly under the circumstances.
Thank you. Do you anticipate that students will be allowed to self-study for more than one AP exam in this environment?
This is a question that I, again, will continue to learn more about with our programmers. I know that we offer many AP courses and many AP exams, and we have to be mindful about that because, again, there are a number of different things that we have to accommodate for. So, it's a logistical. It takes a lot of logistical coordination from our staff, and not that we don't want to do it, but we do more than 4 AP exams annually, and so we have to be mindful about adding more to that. So what I would say right now is I know that there's been a longstanding, policy. I need to learn more about it. I want to talk to our programmers, but I do believe right now that we offer many AP exams, and so I don't want to position us where we're doing more than what we can handle.
Thank you. Thank you. I know Joanne I have maybe 1 or 2 more questions, but I know Joanne also has more, so maybe I should pass it on to her. Joanne, if you are ready.
Yes, we've had a lot of questions in the live stream. I've tried to condense them into little groupings. So they all really have to do with the Stuy exception model. So the first question is, with the model, we have 50-minute classes and they're not scheduled every day.
Yep.
So the questions are about how all the class material is going to be covered. And I'll add to that, there's a question about, are APs being limited due to the fact that they're not meeting every day?
Yeah, this is a really important question and one that our cabinet's been grappling with. Again, questions around time is clearly an important one. I think certain subject areas may allow for not meeting as frequently, and those are conversations we have to see where there might be some gaps. Our expectation is that we're going to have to be tremendously intentional about how to get through the content, both from our periods that we will have with young people, but also the time that students will have independently. And this is one that we're going to have to closely watch, because in the models that we have, and any model that we would have had, instructional time would have been limited because of the fact that, again, we are reopening and we're opening up our building. And this is one that our assistant principals have brought to our conversations, continuing to have conversations with our teachers. And, I think we're going to see this across the entire city, because instructional time is being closely examined to get through the content, and with the fact that we don't know yet around what the assessments that are going to be either mandated or available. And so the best way that I would answer that is, we're looking at our curriculum, we're looking at ways in which we're going to be able to get through the content, and having to make some choices around what are the best ways to prepare our young people if we're not able to get through everything. Because we don't, the last thing we also don't want to do is put so much independent work on our young people to catch up. There will be some level of that in some degree, but we have to be really intentional about the time that we do have, so that our young people do feel prepared for any of those assessments, end of year assessments, that they might be expected to take. So it's going to be ongoing. We're going to continue to provide updates, and going back to our academic expectations, we have to be really intentional about everything that we do. And these are the conversations that are currently happening with our faculty, so that, again, families are aware about what some of those trade-offs are, and then how are we trying to fill those gaps. The second question around I think it was the limitations of AP. Again, part of this goes back to our desire to maintain and retain our course catalog. And so, AP was one of those topics that came up quite a bit, and having that available. So right now our programmer is looking at that to see what is going to continue to be available. We're anticipating that many of our APs will be, and that's what, when we put forth the model, is one of the key priorities. He's currently working on that, and needs a little bit of time to see what our programming will look like exactly. And once we get that, we are going to inform students of their, the selections of APs, of which ones they were able to acquire, and then make sure that we can move forth on that.
Thank you. Another question is about whether paper and textbooks are going to be used. Are we doing everything digitally, or are we going to still rely on paper tests, paper worksheets if you are in the building, or and textbooks?
Yeah, so textbooks have come up, one, because we need to gather them and collect them from students, whether they're in the lockers or whether kids have graduated. So we're working on that in terms of getting the collection back. I know that textbooks have been an important resource for our faculty and for our students. The question for us is, how do we do that in a safe way, in which, if we are using that as a resource, how do we ensure that, again, there's not contamination, and really being able to utilize textbooks equitably. So right now, that is another conversation that we're having, because our teachers have to, again, look at what tools that they're going to be able to use, and then how do we get that to the students. In terms of paper, I think this is also one of which we're looking at the way that we're doing instruction, and then looking at students who may need that as a tool as well. We're going to have to see which students may need those types of resources. If we can do most of it remotely or online, I think we're going to push for that, because I think it's going to be important as we think, 64% of our students and potentially higher are going to be remote. So we have to account for that in a real and feasible way. So I think the students who will be in the building will have to identify and figure out, are those the resources that will help them be successful? And then for those who are remote, we have to clearly be very mindful of those the resources that they're going to need, because they won't be in our building.
Thank you. There are a bunch of questions, people trying to understand how it will be different between the students who come to school and the students learning from home. And one of the questions evolves around with tests or with grades. If you are in the school building, you may be monitored more than if you are at home doing, let's say, a test. And so grades, could that influence grades? What is being done to decrease cheating? Those type of questions about you know, the fact that there will be a lot of students doing work from home, and what will be done to monitor
Yeah.
that.
You know, this academic integrity has been a topic that came up in our cabinet meeting, and I know that this has been an issue. So I think two things that have to happen. One is we're going to have to examine our academic policy and how that works in the remote world. You know, it's going to take a group effort, meaning from families to our staff to our students, and upholding the academic policy and integrity that we expect of everyone. You know, whether you're at home and whether you are in school, you know, I think what we have to be mindful of, and we saw this in the College Board, I think when they administered the AP examinations this past spring, it's that there are clearly limitations. There are clearly expectations that we are holding young people and ourselves around academic integrity. I think, one, as a staff, we have to look at that policy and look at how can we create the conditions to minimize that, and to think about, again, like, what's the incentive for doing that for young people? Like, is it to the point where there's so much at stake that young people feel compelled that that's their only option? I'd like to believe that there've got to be other options, and so we have to examine, like, what's the pressure that young people are feeling to take that route. And then secondly, we have to be really, you know, mindful about our assessments. What assessments are we offering that may allow for a propensity for cheating? You know, and so that means we have to examine how we ask young people to demonstrate their learning. You know, and that's hard because remotely, you know, what might be an easier way for young people to demonstrate their learning than maybe a multiple choice, you know, but maybe that's not the best way to minimize dishonesty. And so, you know, I think that's part of the work here. And while we might have learned a lot in the spring, there's still a lot more to learn, not only for us at Stuyvesant, but across the city and across the country. I mean, the College Board is examining that as well in respects to how they administer their AP examinations. But they made some choices about, we're going to go forth anyway, even with all the limitations. We're going to be in the same boat. And what I hope for, even if it's idealistic and aspirational, is that we've got to work with our young people to let them know there are other choices, and that we've got to be mindful as adults of what pressures are young people feeling, that they think that that's the choice that they want to make, because it comes with a lot of ramifications. I think in a school like ours, academic dishonesty is one of which, you know, again, has implications, and we want to be clear with our young people that, one, we expect everyone to follow it, and then two, again, that there's got to be alternative options besides taking that route. And I want to work with our faculty. I want to work with our young people and looking at those choices. I've said that in my opening statement, or, you know, about describing myself. It's like, young people need to be informed of the choices that they're ultimately going to be responsible for making, and how do we position them to make the best choice. And a lot of that has to do with giving them the information, holding them to high expectations and standards, while also being very mindful of what they might be experiencing and feeling, particularly in a school like ours, where, again, you know, we're very competitive. We have got, you know, really high performing young people, and so we've got to find ways to support them, so that their options are not to go that route, where, again, you know, has tremendous implications.
Thank you. There are questions about how students will be able to get academic support, tutoring help, and also comments about trauma support. I mean, PTSD, and, you know, just counseling support.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that's built into our teacher schedule is office hours. Again, you know, these are really going to be important for families and students to utilize. There will be holes in our teacher schedules in which, again, I know that they're going to want to find ways to support our young people so that there can be appointments and engagements with them to provide that support. You know, we're going to have to look at our budget as well and look at opportunities for our adults to find time in their schedule outside of our normal school hours that, you know, particularly if they're able to offer that, that we want to pursue them, because we know our young people need, you know, different ways to engage with and interact with staff members. So one, we're going to utilize all the time that we have in the school, you know, and then in teacher schedules to maximize opportunities for tutoring, opportunities for engagement, whether it's through the office hours or by appointment. And those are things that we're going to continue to build out. Again, as I mentioned, we have to look at our budget to see if there's opportunities for teachers working outside of their contractual time so that they can offer that within the constraints of their own home life. And then, you know, I think for, again, around the trauma, you know, there's a few things that we're all going to have to do as educators that the Department of Education is asking of us, is to be trained and being able to think about those social emotional supports needed for our young people. And then fortunately we have, you know, an amazing counseling staff under, you know, our AP Pedrick, you know, Ms. Pedrick, who in my conversations recognizes all of those needs that our young people will inevitably have. And so setting up appointments for them, for young people with our counselors, will be tremendously important, and figuring out how we can identify those who really need that support, and being able to connect them with the right people. So, you know, this is something that over the course of the first several weeks, we're going to have to keep a really close eye on, particularly as we're starting those initial engagements with our teachers and our students and the rest of our staff. Are there ways that we can identify where a young person might need additional support? And that's working with the families as well, because you're going to see things potentially at home that we won't be able to see, and being in touch with, you know, Ms. Ingram and our staff to let us know, you know, if you're seeing something that may be a little bit off, that may not necessarily be as visible over a computer, but clearly you are able to see and getting in touch with us. So if there's ways that we can make those connections, we obviously want to take advantage of them.
Thank you. The next question is about, I think one, you can probably clarify, the students that come into school are not going to be moving around the building, but if you could elaborate on that. But in addition, there's questions, I'm trying to combine things together,
Sure.
About arts programming and choruses and band, like what we're thinking about with that, some things, and PE, two of the areas that we know need to be modified.
Yeah. So I'll start with the first one around movement. You know, again, we had to make some hard choices. And safety, our goal is to maintain and fulfill all the safety measures that are going to keep our young people and staff safe. You know, when I walked the building at Stuyvesant, 10 floors, multiple escalators, elevators, hallways, and each room being uniquely designed, I felt, you know, after looking at our model and making that decision, you know, having controlled spaces would be manageable and safer for us. I know there are plenty of arguments one way or the other, but seeing our narrow hallways and having students moving around felt very uncomfortable to me in a number of ways, from being able to monitor all of the nooks and crannies in the Stuyvesant building, as well as our custodial engineers and staff being able to, you know, regularly sanitize and clean the spaces that are, you know, like such as bathrooms on a regular basis. You know, these were all decisions that we're having to make, and so the intent was to minimize as much movement from our young people as possible. We know there's going to have to be some movement, but by thinking about those spaces in which kids even enter and dismiss, you know, those are all things that we're having to look at to try to minimize the amount of movement that young people will make. So that was a key decision when thinking about our model. For classes that are much more hands-on, we are having to reimagine this. I know I've gotten a lot of emails that students wanted to engage in music, want to engage in courses where, again, it's much more hands-on experiences. And what our teachers are having to do is to reimagine what that looks like virtually. And I said this before, many of our things that we're having to do is around demonstrations, where we see our teachers doing it. It's not the same as having our young people do that, but it's one where we have to work within the constraints that we have. And so, if it's a music class, there might be a demonstration by the teacher, but students are doing this at home with their own instrument. And again, if they don't have those supplies and equipment, those are all things that we'll have to look at as well. We're not going to be able to solve every single question immediately, but again, trying to provide the level of experience that we can under the constraints that we have, we wanted to try to make sure that we could do that. Our teachers are fully aware that many of these activities will be done remotely because of the way that our model is set up and the way that our current circumstances are. But those are things that, again, we're having to reimagine. And what we're hoping for is that this is only short term. Again, we don't know what's going to happen a month from now or 2 months from now. And I think we all are hoping that we'll be able to come back to the building and go to some semblance of what we've been traditionally used to. But in the meantime and in the interim, we're having to reimagine those, and when we will continue to do that from a remote environment.
Thank you. I'm going to ask one more question,
Okay.
which is a sort of a conglomeration again. But so the exception model relies a lot on broadband in the school. So there have been some people who questioned whether people with hotspots from their phone might be able to help support that. But I guess the broader question would be, and this was raised in the chat, is there a plan B if what our plan requires can't be provided? Is there a plan B? What is the plan B? Or that's the question.
Yeah. So talking to our technology staff member, one of the things that came up was there have been clearly concerns around whether or not we have enough bandwidth where they're to be able to do this model. What we don't know is, again, we've never put the network and connectivity. We've never tested it to this. What we do feel is that we do believe we need to increase our bandwidth, and we've already done our outreach to the Department of Education. We believe we need to double it from 200 to 400 megabits per second. And we're doing all of those different pieces. We're working with the PA, and we're working, again, we'll be working with the Alumni Association as well to see what are the other ways that we can address those issues. A lot of it will be based upon the Department of Education and what they can or can't do. We believe that they can and should be able to do that and support our efforts. Again, we've done the outreach, we'll continue to do the outreach and trying to ensure that this can come through. We're also trying to channel all our energy towards those things that we potentially have a little bit more control over. We won't know until we're in that position. We'll have to clearly think about alternatives, whether it is hotspots and or continuing to maintain and retain or acquire hardware. But right now, and this was part of the proposal that I put forth, was that we are going to need DOE support in order for our plan to come into fruition. And one of the ways is to double our bandwidth and to help continue to monitor what the school needs, because we're anticipating and expecting that we're going to have streaming and the use of our network throughout our 5.5 hours. So yes, I know it's a concern, and yes, I know that we're going to have to continue to monitor this. And as I said, we're doing our outreach, we're continue to do our advocacy. Once we get word, we're going to continue to update all of you. But this is also going back to what our PA president also said. This is a time to contribute in any way that you can, because we're being as intentional and mobilizing our community to address these issues. And our plan B is that we're going to mobilize or continue to mobilize our community to contribute and find ways that we can do this, because we've got a highly creative and invested school community, and we're going to need all of the important thinking and creativity in order for this to work.
Thank you. I'm passing it off to you, Alex.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Joanne. Thank you, Principal Yu. Before we call this meeting close, I would like to announce that we thank you to everyone who cast their votes. We have an approval for the discretionary principal fund to be used basically starting immediately, so which means that we don't have to wait until mid-September. And we're excited. That gives an opportunity to utilize it for important things like dividers or chargers or other things that or platforms for our students or professional development, just so our students could really benefit and have a good year, whatever the definition of, whatever is the new definition of a good year 2021 brings. So again, huge thank you to everyone. I know, Jimmy, thank you for recording that for our minutes. And then with that, huge thank you to everyone who attended. Joanne, a special thank you for joining in and helping with Q&A. I really appreciate it. Dina, glad to have you back for the ending. Thank you. And on that, we call our meeting close. And good night, everyone. Till the next time.
Thank you very much,
Thank
everyone.
you.